Welcome to the Warband, a World of Warcraft podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Swaglock, and with me today is my co-host, Chicken. Thank you for joining us on our inaugural recording. We've got big dreams and plans for this podcast, but truly, I think this is just an excuse for us to talk about our favorite game, World of Warcraft. Chicken, I think it's safe to say that neither of us are really casual players, but also we aren't hardcore players either.
Well, I would say on a scale of Major League Baseball, we are probably like AA. Like, we're not in the majors. Like, come on. Like, there's no way. But I would say we're like, I think one day, what's his name is going to call me? Max is going to call me. He's going to be like, we need a new DK on the team. Why don't you come and try out here? No, not even close.
Maybe, dude. Maybe. You know, every raid team needs a good blood DK. I think we both have a lot of experience playing blood.
Maybe not like a ton of experience.
But yeah, I think that is good for our viewers to know, though, right? We do a lot of Mythic Plus, but really only high enough in Mythic Plus to get like portals and gear from it. I don't really push higher than that. I know you don't push higher than 10s, old 20s. Yeah. But we raid with our guild twice a week. We've always pushed heroic with raid, but we're starting to push Mythic this season. We did a little bit last expansion, so that's super exciting, and I've been pretty excited about. But also, I think what's really cool about this podcast is it gives us a chance to talk about what average players do in World of Warcraft, right? Because we always listen to podcasts where they're like the pros who push title in Mythic Plus or race to world first. And I also listen to a bunch of podcasts that are really hyper casual, kind of lore focused. And I want to meet somewhere in the middle where it gets to be content that really is kind of pushing for the average player, right? Mythic plus 10s, heroic rating, and those kind of things, but also just fun and casual, and maybe even like talk about a little lore, possibly.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, all I know about lore is this. Yeah, Leroy Jenkins. That's lore, right?
I don't know if Leroy Jenkins is.
I mean,
canon.
It kind of is.
Canon. Well,
is it not?
Well, actually, okay, so here's the thing with Leroy Jenkins. So, first of all, if you're listening in right now, I've been playing World of Warcraft for, I think, nearly 20 years now. I came in at the very end of original Classic WoW, and then kind of got really into the game during the Burning Crusade, Wrath of Lich King era. That's when I started playing. Chicken's a lot newer. Chicken, you joined, I think, end of Shadowlands, right? Midway in Shadowlands?
I think it was like right at the start of season 3, because I remember like the first like couple months or like 4 or 5 months that I played, it was all within one season. Yeah, and that was like from like level, I think I had gotten like a new character, so it was from level like 50 to 60. But I feel like that took like forever because Shadowlands campaign was awful.
Yeah, I remember the first time you raided with us was in Sepulchre, correct? With the jailer?
Yeah, it was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, dude, and now check you out, bro. You're like topping our raids DPS meters every week. So dude, you've come a long way in such a short time.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, yeah.
Yeah. So the Leroy Jenkins question, before we skip over that and get to the other stuff, is really fascinating because Leroy, when we talk about lore, right, we're talking about things that happen in the story of the game. But Leroy Jenkins was something that happened with the players of the game, right? Leroy Jenkins was a player from a famous internet meme long, long ago that many shows have copied, where he runs in screaming his name, Leroy Jenkins. But what's really cool, though, about that, and why it's kind of a halvesies when it comes to lore, is you can actually find, I don't remember the name of the dungeon. I think it's like Upper Blackrock Spire, if I recall correctly. But you can now find a dead Leroy Jenkins, and if you resurrect him, you can do like a mission for him, and then you unlock him for your garrisons from back in WoD. So he is technically in the game now, and you do help him. So it kind of is lore, but also not really at the same time. It's a weird bit. But I would love to, as we continue to have the podcast and do stuff, maybe as things happen in the game, kind of explain some of the story and the lore. But we can save that for later in the podcast. But Chicken, about yourself a little bit as we're kind of diving into it. I want the viewers to get to know us and our experiences with the game, what we're interested in, what we love to do. So when you play WoW, like what are your favorite things to do in World of Warcraft?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. I think at the top of that list, I absolutely adore PvP. Like it's my favorite thing ever.
Really?
And then I
That
actually
actually,
take
like, are
that
you
list.
serious?
Oh yeah, yeah. And then I take that list and I flip it upside down so that it's at the bottom of my list.
Oh, okay.
Because dude, I have like such a love-hate relationship with PvP, and we'll get to that at some point probably.
Well, because I've
But
seen you do it a lot. I've seen you do PvP a lot, and then you won't do it, but you never like push it. So I guess maybe that explains it. Maybe you get into it and then you hate it again.
yeah, it's like one of those things where like PvP is just so you play PvP and you're winning and you're like, oh, this is awesome. I love PvP. And then you lose for like an hour straight, and then you're like, yeah, I hate PvP.
Yeah, that's
And
about right.
and like you don't get that way with Raid, because it's like, what, I'm gonna be mad at an inanimate object? Like, no, like that's just the computer telling me I'm bad at the game. But like if I'm getting nerfed by some like 13-year-old kid, then yeah, I'm gonna get upset.
Well, the worst I think is when you lose PvP and then you like go on Twitch and you find out you just like lost to WoW Grandma or something. That's
Yeah,
where,
right. Yeah,
that's
exactly.
that's where the real salt is rubbed into the wounds. But to your raid comment, I think that's why I love raiding. And for people listening, raid is definitely my favorite, I think, content in the game. Mythic Plus is growing on me. I think I come to love Mythic Plus more and more as I
Really?
do it. Yeah, I really do love Mythic Plus. The timer, I think, is fun. It kind of challenges me to find new and innovative ways to like push content that really. But also, we're gonna be doing Mythic raiding soon, so maybe that will meet that need for me. What I do love though about raiding, and why raiding I think is top for me, is to your point, right? Like you lose in a battleground, you lose in arenas, and if you're on this repetitive losing streak, it doesn't feel good. You feel kind of defeated. You don't really have a way to work around it. You don't know what to do to get better. And what I love about raiding is every time you raid, the goal is right to get a little bit further and further into the boss. My favorite raid nights aren't the nights we defeat a boss. They're the nights we're like smacking our heads against the walls for like an hour straight, but we've gotten the boss from like 75 HP to 50 HP. So we're like, okay, we're coming back tomorrow, and now we know how to do this better. Now it's time to learn the next part of the fight. That to me is exciting. There's something fun about that.
Yeah, now that you say that, I feel like I agree, because the worst raid nights are where it's like you're just like steamrolling everything, and you're like, oh, it took us an hour and 15 minutes to do this raid, like 10 boss raid on heroic, and it should have only taken us an hour, and I'm ticked about it. Like that I feel like that's just me, but like we could literally fight the same boss for 3 hours, and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah, we got farther. We learned.
yeah.
No, I totally get that. I totally
agree.
get that. I think that's why our raid team is trying to something new this season, where we've
Yeah,
historically started in normal, and now we're pushing heroic. Which to our raid teams, like, to give them credit though, when I first joined, I think I joined on the first night they were ever raiding, and we were like progging normal at a very, very slow pace. And so now that we're going into new season, just going like, you know what, actually, let's just skip normal altogether and just go right into heroic. I'm proud of us. We've grown a lot.
Yeah.
We've come a long way.
No, I think it's something to be proud of. I mean, raid is just one of those things where, and I think it's why I feel like my ranking is opposite of yours. I think I like M plus a little bit more than raid.
Yeah.
But raid's kind of growing on me. I feel like raid is one of those things where it's just so much more team oriented that like an M plus, if you have like one bad DPS, it's not the end of the world. Like you can probably still like time your key, whatever. But then like you get into like mythic raiding, and then you're like 1 or 2 DPS are gone, and that's kind of like a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and people start
absolutely.
going down, and then I'm dead, and then someone else is dead. That person knows who I'm talking about, and then it's just all over. It's just might as well wipe it up, clean it up, try again.
That's a shout out to our guildmate J-Rob, who often polishes the floor with chicken at every raid night. And I can make that joke, and I'm only allowed to make that joke about J-Rob and chicken, because they'll die early, but somehow you two will still be at the top of the leaderboard in damage. And I don't get it. I don't get how you can spend half a fight dead and still be like top 3 on a fight. But
it's like
it's
that
impressive.
glass cannon mentality, man. It's
literally.
awful.
It's fantastic. I love having you guys raid those. Fun. We have such an amazing guild and raid team, and I think we'll probably talk a lot about our guild and raiding and Mythic Plus in the future as well on the podcast. One thing I would love to do too, Chicken, on this, and I haven't really discussed it with you, so I'll discuss it live as a recording. But I would love to, like, at some point, start bringing guests in and talk with other people. Whether it's some of our guild mates, talk with even Spell about how to run a guild and what that looks like, and just other things that I think people are very curious about when it comes to World of Warcraft and kind of the behind the scenes of. Because our guild is amazing. Like, there are very few guilds, I think, in the game that run at a caliber, not necessarily caliber of skill in the player base, but the caliber of, like, efficiency and design of the guild. It is beautiful.
Oh no, dude, I 100% agree. And I've seen other guilds. I'm not gonna say who those guilds are. I'm in discords of other guilds and stuff, and it's like, whoa, like this is, I don't want to say it's poorly managed. It's just, you can tell that there's like a different vibe in this guild than there is with ours. There's just like, something's off, right?
Yeah, and most time there's no shame to it. A lot of times guilds are just people coming together going like, we just want a game, and like, here's a group of people that we can do raids with or do dungeons with. In our case, so we got really lucky that we found a guild that is like really geared towards making players feel welcomed and valued and creating opportunities, right? Like, our guild creates opportunities for people to get to know each other and do content together, which I think is truly incredible. And we'll talk about that more in the future.
Oh yeah, dude.
Oh, for sure. And I think that'd be a fun conversation to have one day. However, to shift topics and change up the conversation a little bit right now, though, the War Within is out, right? We've been playing it for the last couple of weeks. This is our first ever podcast, so I think it's good for us to, even though we're a couple weeks late on the topic, to still talk about the launch of the War Within, our opinions on it, because it really is such a cool thing that's happened recently. And so I'd love to hear just like your initial thoughts on the overall experience with launch.
Yeah, I mean, this was probably, well, this is only the second launch I've ever been a part of, and Dragonflight just was, it's not that it wasn't good, it's just, I think that was my first like launch. I was like a WoW launch virgin, and now I'm like more experienced.
Yeah, that's a way to explain it. Yeah,
well, I mean, I feel like that's the only way to explain it. WoW launches are weird, man. It's like a bunch of build up to like, and then it's like in like the snap of a finger, just everyone's playing World of Warcraft, and everyone is just, oh yeah.
Exactly like that. That's right. Everybody sounds exactly like that. Are you sure you're not playing on like Horde dominant servers?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, I would if I could, but
now this launch I think was a bit more controversial. If we're talking about like launch day itself, right? Like the launch day, true, because we had the early access, and I've been hearing a lot of back and forth on early access, what people think about it, the pros and cons. I think I'm hearing a lot of conversation, a lot of chatter about how negative it is because it creates FOMO for people, and it gives players an advantage of getting into the game earlier. But speaking purely from my own experience, just mine and mine alone, the thing I noticed with launch was that servers were so clean on early access launch.
Oh, yeah.
Like, everything ran smooth. Yeah. I think I got kicked out one time, and I was back in immediately. Like, almost no lag.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
And then I came back. I was in the starting area because I was curious. I wanted to see how it felt. I went back to the starting area on launch, definitely not to go kill incoming level 70 players. That was,
oh my gosh.
But I was in listen, I was ensuring that level 70 alliance players coming into the War Within were having the smoothest experience that they could have with their war mode turned on. Okay, that's all I'm saying. However, what I wanted to say is that I did find that the servers were like still running smooth, even on the actual official launch day. Servers were still smooth, and to your point too, right? Like, normally you come in, Dragonflight launch is a great example. You try to get in there and you're lagging out. You open up Asmon Goldstream and he's running fine for whatever reason, but everybody else is like crashing nonstop. You like try to do a quest and it takes you like 10 minutes to pick up an item.
Oh my goodness, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Awful.
It's
It
awful.
was literally, I don't think there's any other word to explain it. Awful.
So
And
I think the like early access, despite because again, the early access is tough because most people who did not have early access that I've encountered didn't like they didn't really it wasn't that big of a deal. It wasn't the end of the world. I can think of maybe like one or two instances where people were like very vocal about it. However, for the most part, most of the people I hear complaining about early access were actually people who had early access complaining on behalf of people who didn't. But again, the launch was so smooth. I just don't know what else Blizzard could do to have such a smooth launch in the future. I don't care. Like if early access never comes back, but they can keep this launches this clean, I'm okay. I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. No, I almost agree with that. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I thought the launch was like incredibly smooth. Like it couldn't have been like you wouldn't even have known. Like if you were a casual player, you didn't even know War Within came out, you would have never known.
No,
Like
you had no clue.
No, I mean other than server downtime, obviously.
Yeah.
But
or the fact
I mean,
that like I don't know, a level 80 Death Knight is sitting in your starting area just killing everybody.
Okay, yeah. Other than
Rip.
that, but yeah, I mean, it was so smooth. Oh my goodness! Like I didn't even play Dragonflight the first day it launched. I was like, no way, Jose.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched some streamers like some not Asmon Gold and like Max and like Tim the Tap Man.
I always forget.
WoW
Yeah,
streamer.
dude, I liked him. Dude, he's funny, man. Even though he only plays WoW when it like launches, but again, you know, like that's his viewer base just isn't super into the game, so it makes sense that he only hops on for launches and whatnot.
Yeah, it does. But I mean, you see them and they're running fine, obviously for a reason. And then there's like some smaller like streamers, they're obviously having problems. So it's like,
Yeah.
So I didn't even try to get on. I was like, I'll wait until like 2 days from now. And then 2 days from now, it was fine. Like it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I was hitting it hard right at the beginning, and I didn't have any issues, which was really nice. However, I think the biggest complaint people were starting to have though with that launch experience was that like a couple days after early access ended, so a couple days after the official launch, they like throttled back how the tuning worked. So the problem we ran into, if you remember during early access, like people were running into dungeons at level 70 and they were just like rolling over everything, right? Like you actually got like weaker. Yeah. You were getting like weaker as your level went up, and it just felt really weird. But I know I was doing it, dude. I was running in on like level 70 tanks, just pulling an entire dungeon, knowing I can't die. I just couldn't die. The scaling was working in my favor. Yeah. And so they rolled that back, and to their defense, to Blizzard's defense, it had to be rolled back because the big problem was that players started to feel weaker as they leveled up, both in dungeons and in the world doing quests. And I think that's a really bad experience. Yeah. If you go in and you're like, wow, I'm leveling up, I'm getting weaker. You should feel stronger as you level up.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And so I think it was the right move to make. However, the timing of the move, I think, really came across like, hey, if you didn't get early access, you lost out on some easy speed leveling.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, but dude, even still, though, I don't know if it's really that big of a deal.
Yeah. I personally, I think early access was a blessing. I mean, it was like 3 days, 4 days, and what you had to pay like $30 for it, was it, or 20 or $30 USD?
Well, yeah, so, but you also got a month of game time too. So
really,
yep. So if you got the early access, right, that also came with a free month of game time. So if you subtract that $15 out of it, I think it ultimately ended up being like an extra $5 or something.
Yeah, okay, well, maybe that was a little bad on Blizzard's part, but I mean, at the end of the day, it really is like, if it was like a whole week, then I would be like, okay, yeah, that's kind of crappy, right? Yeah. But like half a week, I think overall it created a better experience for everyone. So other than this leveling thing, which, I honestly, I hadn't heard of until right now. So, I mean, maybe that's a thing, but
but I just hopped in. I was just leveling right now. A low level character in a dungeon. I think I took a level 72 tank.
Sure,
and it was totally fine. So even now, weeks later, it still feels great. I think it is a better experience though for players. Now, the people who won the level 30 alts, sure, it hindered them a bit. But for the
yeah.
average person going, wow, this game just came out with a new update. Let me go try WoW out for the first time, or return to WoW after 5 years.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah.
Right? They're logging in going, oh, crap, I feel like I'm getting weaker as I level up. This is weird. I don't like this. Game's getting harder, which, I mean, the game should get harder as you level up, but that's a different conversation. In this case, it's not the right way to get more difficult. It should get more difficult in complexity. And so, yeah, it was an interesting piece, but I think worked out altogether. But I liked the leveling a lot, dude. I thought the leveling this expansion was fun. I was dungeon grinding on a lot of my alts, but going through the actual zones and experience on my DK the first time through, it was really beautiful. I loved the zones.
Oh yeah, no, I enjoyed leveling this time, which is very unlike me. I hate leveling. I hate doing questing. Like it's just like do this, do that, do this. Like it's just not for me. But I think I enjoyed it, and I say I think because I feel like it wasn't that bad. I mean, you mixed in delves and dungeons and got to 80 pretty quickly, in my opinion. Like I really don't remember it going that fast from 60 to 70 in Dragonflight. Like I feel like it took so much longer.
Definitely did not.
Like,
I think,
oh my goodness.
One of the things I think Blizzard did really good on too with this launch and with the questing experience was that I'm trying to find the right way to phrase it right now, but that it was a lot more streamlined, but also kind of more packed with content. So like in the past, right? In the past, I always remember getting into Wrath of the Lich King for the first time, right? I am the champion, right? I went to Outlands. I killed Illidan. now I'm heading to Northrend, right, to go fight the Lich King. I'm a champion of the Horde. I would play Horde at the time, right? Champion of the Horde. And I get to Northrend, and all of a sudden I'm being told to go like sort through poop for some like photographic film or something. I'm like, what the frick? I'm a champion. Where do you make me sort through poop for? And a lot of expansions do that. And I think what this expansion did that was so different is it separated out the boar quests from the campaign quests. So I think you've noticed that the campaign felt a lot shorter than in the past. And then they took all those side questy feeling things and just let them be side quests. They weren't a part of the campaign. So there's no point in the campaign where it's like, oh, champion, go kill me 20 boars and get 20 boar livers, right? Instead, everything. And then there's like cutscenes everywhere. Characters had dialogue. Do you ever do the stay a while listens?
No.
Okay, so I don't even know if you know what they are. I'll explain. It seems like something you would absolutely skip. So throughout the campaign, and they started doing it, I think, in Shadowlands. Maybe BFA, but I think they really started doing it in Shadowlands, and they've kind of ramped it up massively this expansion, where after you do a couple quests, characters will have speech bubble dialogues over top of them. And if you click it, it'll say, do you want to stay a while and listen? And then you can listen to like how the characters interact with each other, their voice lines, their dialogues, and you just get like a little bit more of the story.
Really?
And there's something I think very enticing when you're playing a game. And as you're going through the game, it's kind of feeding you more and more of what's going on, and you're learning more and more about the characters. Versus in the past, it would just be like, go kill me 20 unique boars and bring me back 20 unique boar livers. And then you run off. It's like, okay, now go do this and go do that. Right. Those felt kind of weird. This was always like everything I did in the campaign felt like it was pushing the story forward. At every point, it felt like what I was doing was important for catching Xal'atath.
That makes sense.
Which, speaking of which, dude, she is a good villain. I have to give him credit. I have not been like this hyped to fight a villain in like a long time.
Oh yeah. 100% agree. I followed every trace of lore in this campaign. 100%. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes, you absolutely did. Viewers, listeners, he is not lying. He is definitely lying right now. 100% lying.
100%. Yep.
No, Xal'atath is the purple elf lady that has been running around killing everybody.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. That's that's her. That's her. What's really cool, though, Chris Metzen, the guy who directs up the story of WoW, I think he went on an interview recently and said that, or at least heavily implied that we will not be killing Xal'atath this expansion. And most likely not next expansion either. It looks like she's going to hang around for a minute and like really be an antagonist. Like, there's a high possibility. I don't know if you finished the most recent campaign stuff, so I'll let you do that. But in the most recent campaign stuff, at the end, she kind of flees away. And there's a high possibility that might be the last time we see her for like a while, right? Like the rest of the story of this expansion might be a little bit more formed around the dwarves and the Arathi and what they're doing once we get through this next raid. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I'm really excited for that. But if I have to ask, right, because you were going through the campaign, I know you weren't paying attention to the story. However, was there like any zone in the game that just like stood out to you? Like just artistically, I just want to talk about the art of the game, right? This launch happened. The art is gorgeous. It's beautiful everywhere we look.
Yeah.
You have like a favorite?
I don't know the name of it. Well, actually, I think I do. I think it was the Hollow Ward.
Hollowfall?
Yeah, Hollowfall. Where like you're just kind of like, you're up in geez, this is really bad that I don't even know the actual name of where you actually play the main
Khazal-Gar.
Yeah.
Oh
my goodness. Let's not talk about it.
Khazal-Gar is a major zone, right? And then you have the Isle of Dorn, which is the island. Then you have Dorn-Nagal, right? So Isle of Dorn. Dorn-Nagal is the city. That's where you like fly down.
And you fly down to the deeps.
Right, the Ringing Deeps. Yeah, you got that one.
Yes.
The Ringing Deeps.
And then
you go to Hollowfall.
Like go through that little zone and then you just fly into Hollowfall and it's just like sky and it's like such a seamless transition from like cave to like out in the actual open.
Yeah, and the Belladar is like the big crystal thing. Let me clarify that. The big crystal thing, right, is shining and you just see these like airships kind of going around. You know what it reminded me of?
What?
I'm a huge fan of the third BioShock game, BioShock Infinite.
Oh, yeah.
I think artistically that game's beautiful. Like when you're up in the sky and like the lights everywhere and the city's floating in the clouds. That's what that reminded me of was when I first went to that area. Because it also kind of has that like patriotic-y-ish feel in this case, right?
Yeah.
More so with the Crusade type vibe, right? That Scarlet Crusade kind of vibe. However, what I love those, you go in and you just see those like airships just kind of floating by, and it reminded me for whatever reason of BioShock Infinite, and I was like, "Yo, I love that. That look is so cool." Have you watched the crystal turn from like gold to purple when it goes void?
Oh, what?
Yeah. So throughout the day, right, at certain time intervals, I don't know what the time intervals are, but the crystal will actually turn to purple. Like it'll change color and go purple, and the whole area gets darker. It gets more voidy. People, it matters to people if you're like mount collecting and stuff because you can find like a special mount in the dark. Different enemies will pop up. Different quests occur. Yeah, but you can actually watch the crystal. Like there's this whole animation where it kind of like puffs down in purple and like the whole area changes over, and it's really freaking cool.
See, that's I feel like that's kind of my problem, and I'll be honest. My goal was to take some time off when this expansion started, and I was just gonna grind the heck out of it. Like I talked to my wife. Spoiler, I know I'm married. It's crazy. And like, hey, we had a plan like to take care of the house and my kid. Second spoiler, I have a kid, and like she was like, yeah, that's perfect. Like you can play like whenever, all this stuff, and then work was like, yeah, spoiler number 3, I have a job. Bam, we're gonna send you on a work trip. And I was like, no. And then I had to go on work travel, and I missed the entire week after the pre-launch, and I got to play for like 2 hours on the day it launched, and then I didn't play until like last weekend.
Ooh.
And
yeah, that's rough.
It was rough. Yeah, it was really rough. So I basically am still trying to figure out like what everything is. Like I'm pretty sure I come to you and or the Discord like once a day and just be like, hey, where is this weekly quest at? Like I don't even know where I am.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair.
I just have not had the time to do that. And we're gearing up for raid and I've been grinding heroics, and it's like, oh my goodness. Like at some point I will have time to do this stuff, and
Absolutely.
I will look into the grace of the Hollowfall and be happy.
But see, that's why we're doing this podcast, dude. Because now I get to remind you
Yeah.
about all this stuff that's in the game that maybe you would otherwise overlook.
100%.
Yeah, and also this is like the 2 weeks of the season where I'm actually like doing all this stuff. Because once Mythic Plus comes out, once we're like in our raid rotation, all I'm doing is Mythic Plus and raiding. That's where I'm excited. And
see,
so, yeah.
And I think that's a good balance between the two of us, because I feel like right now we're both at level 80, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're kind of like really into lore at this point and really into like story and quest line, and like that's awesome, right? And here I am trying to level up engineering, and then I'll probably never use it for like the next like 5 weeks until we get to a point where it's like, hey, we're kind of like in a good grind with raid, you know. I personally don't think I can get like a ton more loot, so I'm not going to be pushing like 100 M pluses a week, and I can kind of focus on engineering a little more because that's kind of like my thing. Like I do like professions. I think Dragonflight did a good job upgrading professions, and I think they took in a lot of our feedback from Dragonflight and they incorporated it into War Within. So I'm pretty hyped for
what were some things that you didn't like before that they've changed?
So I think the major thing is that they just did not anticipate the need for future seasons. So like, you know, obviously season 1, season 2, season 3, and eventually what became season 4 in Dragonflight. I personally don't think they took into account all of that.
Okay.
And I feel like most people had fully leveled up their entire professions by the end of or maybe even by like mid season 2. So it's like everything that they added on to season 3 and season 4 with those updates, and you know, I'm calling them season 3 and season 4 based on M plus, but you know, what point, you know, 10.2,
it was like the
10.3
Awakened season, right? Or the Faded
season.
Yeah.
Or 10.1 and 10.2. Those seasons, whatever they added in that update with the new zones and all that stuff, I feel like they should have added more specializations within each profession. And I'm not saying like a whole nother tree, but maybe like a couple attributes that you can, you know, give more to your tree and you can improve on stuff. Because it was basically like I was sitting at like all these knowledge points. I had like 20 or 30 or 50 knowledge points from mining that were just useless.
Oh, wow.
So I think they incorporated that at the beginning. I think they have I think they have a ton more trees that just over the course of this whole expansion, you'll just never run out of being able to upgrade those trees. And I mean, unless you're like super like into professions.
That makes a lot of sense. I don't do professions generally. I don't like, it's just not part of the game that like interests me. But I will say I have noticed. No, it is. I just don't.
Dude, you were like the best alchemist in season 1.
What? What? No, dude,
remember?
That's not even true.
Yeah. No, dude, you took alchemy in season 1.
Oh my gosh, yes. So what Chicken's referencing right now is back. Yeah, I think it was season 1 in Dragonflight. Quarter Stars was one of the Mythic Plus dungeons in rotation. Quarter Stars lets you skip something for a boss, I think, if you have alchemy. Oh, you skip the last like 30% of his health or something if you have alchemy.
Yeah, because you poison him.
Yeah, because you poison him. So I took alchemy. I didn't build it up at all. Like, I did not commit anything to it. I think they later changed it on future dungeons where like you had to have like a certain level in that profession.
Yeah, I think you had to have like 25 or something, like level 25. Yeah. So not like crazy, but like it wasn't like you where it's just like I'm just gonna throw it on just for, you know, pure joy and have like, oh my goodness. Dude, that was pretty clutch.
I memed hard in Quarter Stars because I had alchemy and I don't remember what the other profession was, but I picked up a second profession that like was a big benefit when you're going through the area up to the second boss.
Right.
And then on top of that, I would always play my paladin with the truth shield, whatever it was
Oh
called,
yeah.
where it would reveal which one was like the disguised demon. And so like
Yeah.
every single time, like I would just play my paladin and just like power through it, and it was so cheap. And I'd play like any other
Oh,
tank I'd have, and I'd be like, ah, dang it, I don't have all this stuff
yeah,
anymore.
you'd be like, this is rough. Speaking though of dungeons, I really do think Court of Stars is probably one of my favorite dungeons of all times.
Okay.
And I think, just real quick, I think what makes it so cool is just like the role play, obviously, is like phenomenal. But I think the other thing that I like about it is it's relatively short.
Yeah.
And I've noticed about a couple of the M pluses in the War Within are the same way. And I generally like that. I'm weird. I don't like a super full long dungeon like 3 bosses. Mwah, chef's kiss. That's like perfect.
I think the trouble with M plus, like I can do 4 bosses is fine for me.
Oh yeah.
When you get to that 5th boss dungeon, and especially the 5th boss dungeon that has tons and tons and tons of trash. So I'm thinking of like Uldaman from last
oh
season,
yeah.
Right?
Oh my goodness.
That one's rough, right? Halls of Infusion was another rough one. These are dungeons that like when you're, the problem with them too is when you have like a really long dungeon and it's an M plus and you're watching the timer and you realize about like halfway through, maybe 3/4 of the way through, that you're just not going to time this thing, and you've already sunk like 40 minutes into it.
Yeah, right.
Right, like it just doesn't feel good, and so, but you want to see it through to the end, get whatever crest you can, or flight stones or valor stones, but it just doesn't feel fantastic. So I do like this. If you like Court of Stars, have you done, I don't know how many dungeons you've done in the 80 plus pool or the level 80 pool, but the City of Threads is basically, yeah, it reminds me a ton of Court of Stars. And a little bit of Tazavesh. You remember the market portion of Tazavesh?
Oh yeah. I have done that one, but I don't think I was like in the. I feel like I've just like followed what other people have done and was like, oh yeah, this works, right?
I'll have to go through it with you again at some point so you can see it. Like, but it's really cool because you have to like find these like hidden ghosty looking things and then follow them to where the enemies are hidden. So it feels, there's like a very like Court of Stars-y kind of vibe to it that I was like Court of Stars, and it also has that Tazavesh marketplace feel where you're kind of going through this open world market area, but you're trying to like not pull everybody and make your way through. I like that. I like that feel. There's something I really enjoy in the dungeon. Open world dungeons I think can be really cool, but the problem with them is most of the time an open world dungeon. So if you think about Brackenhide Hollow from Dragonflight, that was an open world dungeon.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's just like an area in the world that now all of a sudden has turned into a dungeon. Normally, open world dungeons, everything is just like an enemy, right? It's just trash.
Yeah.
What were you about to say?
Are you sure it was Brackenhide?
Yeah, Brackenhide Hollow was an open world dungeon because that's where we used to power level. Remember, we would take players there and just like kill everything and power level them up.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you were talking about No Cood.
No Cood's an open world dungeon too, yeah. But that one's like
it is?
Yeah, it is an open world dungeon. It's a little bit more unique in the sense that what you're fighting isn't normally hanging out there, right, in this specific case, but it is an open world dungeon.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah, open world dungeons are any dungeon that you can access that area even when you're not in the dungeon itself. So like the dungeon takes place in a spot in the world. That's open world. And what I like about City of Threads is that there's NPCs you have to fight, and then just NPCs who are hanging around. And it makes the dungeon kind of, there's a vibe that it gives where you're like, oh, I'm going through and I'm doing a thing. I kind of feel like a Jason Bourne or something, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm on a mission, and I'm like fighting people without trying to rile up the crowds and like get caught by the security. It's cool. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. I will say I've gone through a lot of these on Mythic Plus, and I will say, like, some of these boss mechanics are definitely going to be a little rough, but I'm excited for it. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, that's that'll be something that we'll get to eventually. Yeah, because like you can steamroll them right now, but they'll get a lot harder.
Oh yeah, the interesting thing though is next week with the start of the season, which is interesting. The season's starting, but we don't have Mythic Raid and we don't have Mythic Plus dungeons. I think the best gear you can get in your vault is from Delves.
Really?
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure what the numbers turn out to, but I think if you can push up to like an 8 on the delve. I don't know what you would call that, a level 8 plus 8, whatever that is, but a level 8
Yeah.
delve.
Something.
Yeah, something 8 and 8 in there. But if you can push up to that, I think that's what gives you the best rewards in your vault if you do enough of them to get like a full delve vault.
Yeah.
And so, which will be interesting. I'm curious about the more difficult delves, because as delves are right now, I'm gonna be totally honest, dude. They're not my cup of tea. I'll do them.
No.
They're interesting. Like, they're more interesting, I think, than just doing a quest.
Yeah.
But like, everything is kind of fairly easy to kill. There's no challenge, right? All the puzzles seem pretty straightforward. But I haven't done,
I
again,
agree.
nothing higher than the 3. When I was doing beta testing, I was exclusively just doing Mythic Plus beta testing so that I could make videos for YouTube and make guides for that. And so that was exclusively what I did for testing. I didn't want to spoil anything from the actual like content of the game. But what are what's your impression on delves?
It's kind of funny because, you know, we had this mop remix and you had to do like scenarios, and I didn't really like scenarios. I thought scenarios were awful, but I did them because it was like the weekly quest. It was easy to do in mop remix, you know, easy gold and easy threads. Like, let's just
and
do
scenarios, I believe, were a thing back in Mists of Pandaria when it came out.
Yeah. And that makes sense because, you know, it's legacy. They're trying to, you know, hold up to that. And I really do think that they took everything bad about scenarios and kind of pushed them away and took the good and made that into delve.
It's very possible.
Like, but I don't think that makes me like delves, to be honest. I don't think it's like, oh, you took scenarios and took the bad things out and made it, just took the good things and put them in delves. I don't think it makes like delves just like the greatest thing ever. They're like mid to me. Like on a scale of like 1 to 10, they're easily a 5 to 6.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not. I would like you said, I would prefer to do them over questing, but I don't think I would prefer to do them over a dungeon at this point right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I think having now, as WoW players, right? Once they put good rewards in there, then of course I'm doing it. Right? Like, of course.
Right.
The problem though comes when they do the Torghast thing, where they give you a good reward, but they're making you do like the worst content for that reward, and it's just miserable, and you just feel bad. He's like, I don't want to do this. I'm being forced to do this to get something, so I can go do something else, right?
Yeah, right.
If the whole point of delves is I'm doing delves just so I can go raid, that might not feel so good.
No, it won't.
But I'm curious about these plus 8 delves. Because if the level 8 delve is challenging enough that I go, you know what? I don't know if soloing this is the best way. Let me see if I can grab some friends and do it with them and try that out. Then that might be more fun to me. I want something that feels like a challenge and something that feels like I'm actually like really pushing for it. And so that would be cool. And of course, they're also designed that you should be able to do them solo. It might maybe be a little bit harder or take a little bit more work or something.
Yeah.
But they should be soloable. I think it just scales to how many people are in your party. However, having multiple people in your party gives you opportunities to have tanks and healers and etc.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think my only concern with delves is the how do you word this? The basically not getting loot, right?
Yeah.
And having to have the keys and like, yeah, that's like a cool way of like, hey, like you can sometimes get loot, like good loot, but like for the most part, like it's going to be like a 25% chance or like a 20% chance that you'll get like an actual piece of gear. And I think that's the thing that really pushes me away at maybe even lowering it on my tier to like a 4.
Yeah.
Just because it's like, yeah, like a heroic, yeah, cool. I'm gonna get like a piece of what adventure gear.
And you get that 571 from heroic, correct?
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, like that fits me right now, but you know, eventually I'm gonna do M plus, and you know, when you do M plus, it's like I mean, I guess that's even like M plus is like not always getting loot, so maybe my logic is flawed here.
Maybe it is. I think too, part of the conversation is like loot that you get for the difficulty of the content, and that's kind of part of the conversation too, right? Because I do know a few people.
Fair.
Like I have a few good friends, people I enjoy gaming with. Like I really like a lot, and they're excited for delves, right? And for them, it's like Delves is the content that they've been most hyped for in World of Warcraft.
Yeah,
And they want to be able to get gear that's on par with the gear that everybody else is getting
that's
in
true.
World of Warcraft. And so the part for me that I'm like, okay, they want, like, how do we make gear in Delves on par with gear in other forms of content in WoW? Because you just giving gear for giving gear then turns into like, well, we have to go do Delves so that we can go raid, right? Or we have to do Delves so we can compete in M+. Because my fear is raiding requires you to form a group, if you want to do Mythic, of 20 people who are committed, who are working together, who are playing at the best of the best, having somebody who's organizing that, right? Like a weekly schedule that you're getting together to do this thing. It's difficult, and commitment and time and research, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then on top of that, you have Mythic Plus, which is highly competitive with a timer. It's pushing you in difficulty. It's requiring all 5 players to be at their best, be well aware, right? You have to walk into M+. And this is one of the reasons why I like M+, is you have to walk in prepared, knowing like what to expect, how to handle it.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody needs to know their role.
Yeah.
How do you create that level of difficulty, that level of commitment and time, right? Because I think if the difficulty and time commitment aren't the same, but the reward is the same, it feels bad. So how do you create that,
agree.
right? But we'll probably talk about Delves more when they actually come out with the level 8s and not just speculate. However, did you hear? I think it's called the 13th Delve. Did you hear about that?
I have no idea what that is.
Okay, so I don't know too much about it, so we won't hang on the topic. But the 13th Delve is supposed to be this like extra Delve-ish experience, where instead of being a Delve, instead of being like puzzles, it's actually supposed to be just like, I think, like an enemy that's like super, super hard to kill. And so maybe more like a mage tower thing from Legion, like some sort of like difficult challenge in terms of just fighting this monster.
That's kind of neat, actually.
Yeah, so I'm not totally sure when that opens up. I'm waiting to find out more information, but I'm sure we'll find out probably pretty soon. I'm sure I could Google it and find out. I just don't know off the top of my head.
And it's like,
yeah. And honestly, dude, I'm just waiting for M+ right now. That's all I'm doing, dude.
Yeah, I get that, dude.
But did you hear? Did you hear? So they just announced this week. Just kind of moving along, right? We've talked about launch. Kind of want to change topics away from the War Within launch real quick. But already, right? So the first season hasn't even started, and they're already talking about the 0.5 patch that's coming out with the anniversary.
I know, that's kind of nuts. It's they're like, they're crazy, man.
Well, my guess is that they're trying to get it out quicker than normal. Because their content schedule seems to be faster than it's ever been before, which is good for me. I'm not complaining about that.
Oh yeah, who's gonna complain about that?
But secondarily, I also think that the anniversary is forcing them to be faster on it because they want to make it in time for the anniversary event that's going on. And so this is their 20th anniversary. Yeah. Did you see Did you see like all the stuff that they've announced for it?
No. Well, yeah, like a little bit of it. I mean, I don't like to be rash, but like most of that stuff is, and again, I hate to blame it on this thing, but like I just have not been keeping up with as much WoW as I'd like to, and it's basically just been grinding for the most part. But I've seen they got some cool reskins of some mounts and some cool stuff like that.
Yeah, dude, it's pretty cool. So they've got like the reskins of things. They've got some new items coming out. They have the tier 2 tier sets from way back in the day.
Oh yeah,
they were like super iconic, and so they're bringing these tier sets back now as like high resolution HD models, which is super cool. Death Knights though did not originally have a tier 2. They weren't in the game yet, and so they gave them a model that actually kind of like uses almost like it's almost like the Lich King crown with like helmet with like a hood around it. It's pretty cool. So I'm hyped about that. Then they're adding in another raid, so we're gonna have 2 raids this season. So we have the main.
What?
Yes.
Oh, right. I did see that. Yeah. Sorry.
you're good. So
I was like, what?
So Blackrock Depths is coming back. Blackrock Depths was actually a dungeon originally. That's the one that you always hear me joking about how they should make it an M+ dungeon because it takes like 5 hours to complete.
Oh, right.
And so they're bringing it, so they're bringing it back as a raid with 8 bosses, although it's only going up to heroic mode. So I'm assuming they don't want to like step on the toes of the actual raid going on right now. So they're only pushing up to heroic, which will be cool.
But that makes so much sense. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't need 2 mythic raid pools at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that will be a lot of fun with the guild too, being able to just kind of have another thing, right? Maybe if things start to feel like they're slowing down with our main raiding progress, we can go into that, or just add in
Yeah.
like a third night during the week when we're like, hey, this is something to use to teach more players how to raid, while our guild's actually doing like the hard content on the different nights of the
Yeah,
week.
no, that's like perfect.
Yeah, so the anniversary stuff's really cool. That's hype. I'm thrilled for that. What has me curious though, and has me really interested, is that along with the anniversary stuff, they also announced some things going on with the point 0.5 patch, including class and dungeon tuning.
Oh yeah, it's kind of nuts that they're already tuning everything.
Yeah, because it literally just came out, and we haven't even had a chance to go into Mythic or Raid yet, and they're already announcing tuning.
Yeah, right. It's crazy. Yeah, I didn't look too much into it just because, again, I'm on that grind. But
yeah,
I did hear that there is some tuning. I didn't hear like what's getting like the big hammer and what's getting like the lifted up on the shoulders, but
a lot of it's like reworking of hero talents.
That makes sense.
Yeah, a lot of hero talent reworking, even though some of it's not even just reworking of the hero talents and their abilities, but also appearances. So they're redoing like the Dark Ranger appearance, because people complained that Dark Ranger didn't like look very Dark Rangery. So they're making that a lot cooler. It feels a lot more like a Dark Ranger. When I was watching some of the animation work from it, it reminded me of Sanctum of Domination when you're fighting Sylvanas on top of the tower. A lot of her like stuff. It just gave me that kind of vibe. Yeah. So it was a very, very cool like look to it that they're giving it. But it's just interesting though that they've already announced tuning. I'm assuming, my guess is that because the launch was so fast, right? This was a very quick launch, launched earlier than anybody had predicted it would launch. I think they just didn't have everything dialed in exactly where they wanted it. And so they had to get it good enough for launch. And then now they're kind of coming with like another wave of like, okay, here are changes we know we want to make, but we need a minute for them to be experienced on PTR and tested before we can just throw them into the live game. So I'm assuming that's what it is. Hopefully, though, because again, too, the other thing is Race to World First is around the corner. And so imagine if like all these people for Race to World First were prepping their characters and like getting ready, and then Blizz comes out and goes, actually, guess what? 2 days before Race to World First starts, we're redoing all the tuning, and so your builds aren't even like the optimal builds anymore. Your whole raid team needs to choose different classes, different specs. That would oh gosh, that would not be well received. That would not be well received.
Really bad.
And Blizzard tries to stay like hands off with Race to World First. They don't like fund it. They don't like really promote it too much or anything. But I do think they're well aware of it as they make their decisions.
Oh, dude, that is like, I always say that is the one thing that it doesn't matter what kind of content you're in. Like, that is something that like you can get enjoyment out of watching. Like,
oh yeah,
if you're into PvP, if you're into just like questing and professions, or if you're into PvE, like I think everyone can admit like, okay, Race to World First is kind of cool. Like,
yeah, right. It's just fun, and it's fun to like hype it up. And even if you're not watching it, just be aware, like watching the numbers. Oh yeah, like, oh, Echo's pulling ahead. Now Liquid's ahead. And because Liquid and Echo are kind of the main teams, and one's American based and one's European based, there is kind of that like a little bit of pride in there too, where I'm like, Echo better win. They better win. They better prove that NA servers are the best servers. You know, it just kind of gets a little fun.
Yeah, they should.
It gets a little fun. I love that. I do think it's just interesting though that they have that tuning stuff coming out so quickly. The other thing, though, that they announced with the 0.5 patch, that's a big deal, is Drakthir are getting more classes.
I did actually see this one.
Yeah,
so dude. I'm pretty hype about that.
Yeah, so I'm mixed, man. I'm pretty mixed on my
feelings
about it. So on one hand, I'm like, yes, of course, Drakthir should be getting more classes. You know me, I get worked up when races get classes that lore-wise just don't make sense for them to have.
Yeah.
Light forged warlocks. That makes no sense. It makes no sense. And I will ramble about that another time on the podcast. I'm sure I will. However, in this case, all the classes they gave them made sense. It's all like the main stuff, like hunter, rogue, priest, mage, warrior, and warlock. Which is pretty cool that they got all those. And all those make sense for if like a new race is trying to learn other fighting styles in the World of Warcraft on Azeroth. Those would be the ones they would learn. There's a lot of commentary about why do they have priests but not paladins. That's actually a conversation about how priests and paladins use holy magic, right? Priests call upon the light to aid them in combat, whereas paladins tend to make oaths and commitments to the light in return. And so paladins usually require an order that they follow. And pretty much all of WoW lore, paladins always have like an order. Every race that has paladins has an order for that. So I imagine in the future we could get them, but we just don't have that really truly written into the lore in a solid way yet. And so I'm sure that's down the road. However, what does bother me isn't lore this time.
Really?
For the first time, it's not lore that bothers me about a race getting classes, but rather it's actually about their racial abilities. So they still have, right? They still have Tail Swipe. They still have Wing Buffet, which are huge, huge deals, right? So as a race,
dude, those are crazy.
Yeah, as a race, they move faster, right? Because you can still do like the little double jump and glide, or like jump and glide thing, right? So you can still move faster than everybody else. You take no fall damage, right? Because every time you go to fall, you'll just glide. You have multiple like interrupts and like force movement abilities.
Yep.
Like and not only that, but they get like a little damage multiplier, which a lot of races get like a small damage multiplier. But this one, I think most races get like 1%. This one's like 2% or something. I'd have to look at the numbers. I don't have it in front of me right now. Because the Drakthir were designed to work in tandem with Evoker, right? So like Evoker and Drakthir, really their abilities were married together. Their racials were designed for the Evokers. And now all of a sudden you have like a race that can just move faster than anybody else, take no fall damage, have multiple interrupts. There's no, like, if you're doing Mythic Plus, there's no reason you should ever not be playing a Drakthir.
Oh yeah, 100%. If your class allows it, you shouldn't be.
Like, dude, I would not be surprised if you saw like M plus teams like some season this expansion. Maybe not this season, probably not, because it won't come until 0.5. But if the classes line up just right, I would not be surprised if you saw M plus teams that were like all Drakthir.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it. It wouldn't surprise me one bit.
Dude, think about like everybody in your group having tail swipe.
Oh, dude, that's like
that'd be busted. That'd be busted.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, and like, I mean, you look at the classes that they are. What are they? They're like mostly OP classes right now.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say OP, but like mage. Like, come on, that's been historically like a really.
And I think all of mage feels good right now. I think arcane is like top dog, but all of mage is feeling pretty good. And tuning wise feels good. I've been doing Blood Decay and Brewmaster is like the two that I've been playing most right now. I think Brew just gave me a nice change of pace from what I was doing last season.
Yeah.
But I think I'm firmly back in Blood Decay like territory. I kind of took a break from it just to have a break, but I think I'm 100% back on Blood.
Really?
Yeah, what happened was I was doing beta testing, and on beta, I kept dying on Blood Decay to like bosses nonstop. Every time a boss would do a tank buster, I'm just dead. I was just dead. I was using up all my defenses. I was panicking every time. And then Blizzard came out with that major nerf to self-healing for DKs. At that point, I was like, okay, I'm really out. Like, I just can't enjoy this anymore. And so I was like, all right, I know how to play Brew. Brew's looking all right now. They didn't get hit with that nerf. In fact, Brew actually had their stagger increase. How much they can stagger was increased. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Brewmaster. And so I start running into M plus dungeons on beta on Brewmaster. And now all these things that were killing me before are just like not even like hardly phasing me, right? Because it just goes right into my stagger damage. And so I was like, okay, this is the move. So I was doing Brew all throughout beta. And I think because of that, I was like on the Brew train hard. I was like, this is what I want. I'm enjoying this. I was like trying to subtly convince our raid leader to ask me to play Brewmaster Monk for raid instead of Blood Decay, which I don't know what raid leader on the planet would ever give up their Blood Decay at raid, but that's a different conversation. and then this expansion, right? I geared up my Brewmaster basically to the point where I was ready for our raid team to start heroic. And I was like, okay, let me also gear up my Blood Decay, just have both ready. And I started playing Blood Decay again. And this happens to me every season, by the way. Every season I like play with another tank for a while. And then I'll go back to Blood Decay and be like, oh yeah, I love playing. And Blood is like doing good damage right now. Their damage profile feels phenomenal.
Bro,
I
that
think
is you.
yeah, I've been playing like Deathbringer, I think it is.
Really?
Yeah, dude, it feels really good.
Oh yeah, Deathbringer is the
Hmm
damage ones.
hmm
Sand Lane.
Sand Lane's the other one, which I was
Is
having fun with Sand Lane on
yeah,
beta a little bit because it's a little bit more healing focused, and that's fun. It
yeah.
was good. It was good, but as of right now, I'm doing Deathbringer.
That's what I've been messing with
The
on my yeah.
Yeah. The nice thing too with the hero talents is that the hero talents aren't that major, at least for Blood DK, aren't that major of changes in how I play and what I do. And so there's a good chance I could be going into raid on some fights and just be like, oh, let me just switch to Sand Lane because I need the more self healing or something
Yeah.
on this fight. I could totally see that happening. I'm kind of keeping Deathbringer. I might find myself doing it in Mythic Plus. I'm not as good as some of the
True.
other tanks where like I can't always sacrifice my defensives and my self healing to take more damage or do more damage. So who knows? We'll see what I do.
That's true. I
But
mean, I'd like to think you're pretty good.
so
I guess
yeah.
go ahead.
No,
Go
no.
ahead.
No. You wrap up your thought.
So like before we move on to something else with this the Drakthir,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that they will add Evoker to other races?
That's actually a good question a lot of people are asking. So my answer is no, but maybe. And let me explain what that means.
Really?
It means
You don't think they will?
as things are right now, they cannot add them to other races because all of the Evoker's abilities are inherent abilities to the Drakthir themselves, right? The Drakthirs were created by Deathwing to do these things, right? They were created to be Evokers. They're created beings with a purpose to be Evokers. So their powers and their abilities are all innate to themselves. Like technically speaking, any Drakthir that's like also a warrior should still be able to do any Evoker ability. Technically, because why not, right? Like they didn't just unlearn those abilities.
Yeah.
But that would be game breaking, so please, Blizzard, don't let that happen.
Right.
However, right, as like let's say I'm playing my character. My character is a night elf. My night elf can't just breathe fire. I mean, okay, my brewmaster night elf can, but that's a party trick, right? And so that's the question. So the way that Blizzard would have to write in a way, and I don't know what the answer is entirely, but Blizzard would have to write a way in which non-dragons can have all of these abilities. And there's two things they could do. And one's I think both kind of cheat around the question a little bit. I think I like the second more, though. So the first one is the dragon aspects could take on a group of mortals like ourselves, right? The night elves, dwarves, whatever, and empower them with evoker abilities, right? They could say, we're going to grant you these powers, because the evoker abilities are basically based off the aspects powers. So that could be the one, right? They could say, we're going to grant you these powers. The other option that we have, and I kind of like this option more, and it's easier, actually. I think it's easier for Blizzard to write. That and also, I think it's worth noting, this is important for the conversation, as they've added new classes to the Drakthir, the other classes are able to fight in their visage form, right? So evokers, when they fight, they go into dragon form. The other classes, though, can stay in their visage form. So
that's a good
what
point.
would be interesting is if they said, okay, we'll add other races to be Drakthir, however, or other races to be evokers. However, they're technically Drakthir who are appearing as other races on Azeroth in their visage forms. And so
interesting.
So the answer would be, hey, you still have to turn into a freaking dragon when you're in combat, but when you're out of combat, you can be a night elf, dwarf, a gnome, mecha gnome, whatever, right? So that I think would probably be the best way they could pull it off, because it would be like, okay, this makes total sense. There's no cheesy like, oh, the aspects just gave you the power, cool. Because there's no reason for the aspects to do that, right? That doesn't really make much sense. So to me, this makes the most sense, that it's actually just more Drakthir.
Yeah, I kind of like that, though.
But yeah, that's kind of everything in terms of like the Drakthir and what Blizzard's doing with them and what they could potentially do with them in the future. And so, dude, I just love, I love talking about the lore behind why they do what they do, because I think that's really cool to me, is how Blizzard makes the decisions to build the world that we game in. Even though you and I, Mythic Plus and Raid is what we love to do, I still love that there's some like story to that. And so to wrap up the
Yeah.
podcast, I think what would be really fun, and maybe this will be a segment that continues on in the future as we do more episodes. Maybe we'll cut it because it won't be that interesting. But Chicken, you don't know a lot of the WoW story. And in part, it's just because you're not interested in it. And in part, it's because the game doesn't do the best job at teaching newer players the vast history of World of Warcraft. And also, you still haven't borrowed any of my World of Warcraft books for some light reading. So,
Yeah, but that's why they made the movie, man.
you know what? Contrary to what a lot of people say, I actually dig the movie. The movie's a vibe.
I
like
know
it.
you do. It's kind of weird.
No, I like the movie. It's good. It's good. However, I want to talk about the opening. So you remember when we go to Dalaran and Dalaran like teleports, and then we're in combat with all the Nerubians and whatnot. I want to kind of talk you through that a little bit and what's going on there. Just because I feel like there's a lot going on. So as you were going through that experience, what were you thinking? Like, what was on your mind as you're running through Dalaran fighting these like spider people?
You want my honest opinion?
Honest opinion.
Wow, this sucks. I hate questing. Like, I'm dead serious. Like, it's not that, and I'll let you get back to it. It's not that I don't like the lore. It's just I'm so like indulged in the actual gameplay that it's like hard to actually like separate the lore from the gameplay. I will admit, I think some of the best lore that I've actually followed was when I was leveling my Evoker. You know, when you level it in Dragonflight, you start at 58 and do like 2 levels in like the leveling zone.
Yeah.
For Evoker. And like that was actually like fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was kind of cool to see that, like how that kind of stuff goes over, and then that kind of plays into the first raid, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like everything does kind of like, you know, play off each other, and it's like, oh my gosh, like wow. Like,
yeah,
no pun intended, like everything works together, and like that actually went through my mind, and I was like, oh, I really need to start paying attention to the lore. And then I didn't.
Yeah, and I don't think Dragonflight or Shadowlands, for that matter, did the best job at making like interesting lore, if I'm being honest with
fair.
You. To your defense too, I think Razagath was the coolest villain we had in Dragonflight.
Oh yeah,
by far.
Oh my goodness.
And then we kill her in the first raid, like literally patch 1, and she's gone. But I love that first season when she was just taunting us all the time in Mythic Plus, and we had to like encounter her in the Evoker storyline. And that's why I'm hoping Xal'atath hangs around for a minute, right? Because I like that. I like that build.
That makes sense.
So let me kind of explain a little bit what's going on in that whole story, what's going on in that opening kind of cutscene. I'm going to do a vague, like, 1,000 feet up overview of what's happening here. So
sure,
it's not going to be super detailed, but we'll dive into a little bit. So in that opening cutscene, right, you have those spider people who like just kind of start showing up out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
And so the spider people are a big part of the War Within. They're called Nerubians. And we first encountered Nerubians actually like 20 years ago. So when Warcraft 3 came out, like shortly before World of Warcraft launched, they were working on the 2 games together. And so we encountered Nerubians in Warcraft 3, first in Northrend. So when Arthas Menethil, right, the first Lich King, goes up to Northrend, they encountered the Nerubians, and ultimately the Lich King and his armies had subjugated the Nerubians to work for them. And so we fought Nerubians back in Wrath of the Lich King. When we went back to Northrend, there were some Nerubian dungeons, and they were involved in raids and other content. So we had a lot of experience with them then. That's why that motif is very familiar. A lot of people are very familiar with the Nerubians. However, we didn't know that there were more Nerubians living somewhere else. And the Nerubians are one of the bug races that live on Azeroth. There's multiple bug races. I think you probably saw some in Mists of Pandaria as well. I don't remember the names of those guys off the top of my head, but we encountered them there. And the interesting thing with the bug races is they all kind of derive from the old gods. So at some point they were like formed from the old gods as part of their armies, just as like the Titans had the Earthen and the Keepers that fought for them. The old gods had their own armies, and part of that were these bug races. And the Nerubians were one of them. And the Nerubians we've encountered at some point turned back to the old gods and said, nope, we're not fighting for you anymore. We're doing our own thing. We saw that in that cinematic. And
They
then
fight for us.
yes, and then years later, the queen's daughter, right, the princess, is like, no, this is terrible. I want to go towards the void. Xal'atath had been talking to her, convincing her to like be empowered by the void, and so she goes and she stabs her mother, kills her mom,
Whoa.
takes over the Nerubians, and that's why the Nerubians are suddenly hostile towards us, working for Xal'atath, because Xal'atath is promising them power, and generally the bug races kind of lean towards the void. When the void opportunities arise, it's hard for them to resist. So that's what's going on there in that moment. So that's a little bit of lore. Why is Xal'atath working with these bug people? What's going on? Is Xal'atath a fan of spiders? Not necessarily. This is just something that the void does. Yep. So that's that. But the reason why I wanted to do a little bit of lore talk, even though we're running kind of late on our recording, is because we are so excited to have people listening in on these conversations. But we also want you to be a part of the conversation as well. So thank you so much for listening. But if you ever have questions, if you ever have topics that you want us to talk about, things that you're curious about our opinions on, you can leave a review wherever you're listening to the podcast. And in your review, of course, give us a good review, please. But you can leave a question, and we'll try to get on the show here. Or if you want, you can go into my personal Discord, the Swaglocks Warband. We'll put a link in the show notes that you can follow to my Discord, and then there we'll have a channel that you can ask any questions for the podcast that we can answer in the future, or just comments that you have on things that we could bring up and talk about. Because I would love to talk about whether it's questions about lore, whether it's questions about content coming out in the game, dungeons, Mythic Plus, raids. We just love to talk about it all.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And it's wow.
Absolutely. I mean, and plus, dude, we're trying to fill an hour of conversation here. Please help us out. That's a huge help, especially when things start to slow down. Like right now, we got tons to talk about. There's so much more we could talk about. New expansions out, new content coming out, new stuff next week, more in 2 weeks, and then even more, I think, in 2 months coming out that's already been announced. So we have lots going on. But even still, we would love your questions. We love your comments. And thank you so much for listening to the Warband podcast. If I'm being totally honest with you, we're not sure yet if this is going to be an every week podcast or an every other week podcast. I think right now the plan is every week. But we're going to see how that goes, how that feels, and we'll let you know if that changes. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. And I don't know how else to say goodbye. I guess we just log out, right? Is that what happens? I don't know. /exit.